What was the worst period in history? The American magazine Time decided that 2020, and it seems to me that Time magazine would do well to hire a competent historian. Yes, it was a time of fierce political divisions, racial riots that escalated into violence and, most importantly, a pandemic that unsettled us. Each of us had troubling thoughts and the feeling that it was from this planet. We met in a strange period of her life, but, believe me, not the worst in this video. I will give you the opportunity to wake up in other, more difficult time periods, so as not to judge 2020. In the heat of the moment, you will learn what life is like without the sun, how the absurd rule of one person can cripple the fate of thousands of people. And what was the worst year in human history? You woke up very early to sharpen a copy for hunting a mammoth. You are a close culture and living in the late Triassic period in North America. Suddenly you see a strange star in the sky with a long white tail. It continues to grow every day. You live at a time when people, of course, do not yet know anything about space and that this strange star was actually a huge asteroid, consisting of fragments up to 4 kilometers in diameter, and here the object crashes into the ice sheets of North America and Europe. The energy released at that moment starts a series of fires. You grab your wife, children and run away from the fire. A huge amount of ash formed from burnt-down dense continental forests is mixed from the side by the Michelin amount of water vapor released into the atmosphere. When the asteroid struck, it was a black veil that covered the sun. Therefore, you continue your journey in the darkness. The water of the glaciers begins to melt. You see waves 200 feet high rushing northward, which would have completely covered Tower Bridge in our time. You recently fled a fire. And now you are afraid that you and your loved ones will be covered with a wave of meltwater rushing into the Atlantic. Ocean currents will be interrupted for decades, plunging the world back into a small ice age that will last 1,000 years. Now you are a nomad without a home who wanders in search of at least some non-extinct plants or animals to feed your family, more precisely those who did not die on the way, and if in ancient times the lives of people were threatened by space. The phenomenon, with the development of society, damage on a cosmic scale could be caused by people themselves. The worst time for political reasons. You wake up again very early, like you, a poor farmer from China in the late 20th century. You need to go to work to earn points. Many years later, a similar salary will be shown in the TV series In a Black Mirror. As an option for the development of events in the near dystopia of a member of the future, and the audience will not even know that this has already happened, the leader of China, Chairman Mao Zedong, has developed an economic and social plan for a rapid modernization of wages, and money is replaced by a system of work points of private property, too. From now on, everything belongs to the commune. Millions of skilled farmers have been transferred from agricultural work to industrial crops. There is no one to harvest, and it begins to rot. You are desperate to save the harvest. How little the decree gives to exterminate all the sparrows so that they stop eating grain seeds are shocked by such a stupid political reform. After all, when Vorobyov was destroyed, there was no one to destroy. Locust. You are unable to stop the invasion of these pests on your own. You have nothing to eat, and as a result, you, like the 50 million other people affected by the insane policy, die of hunger. A little to stay at home during the quarantine period. This is nothing compared to times. Little at any time we could order delivery of food safely in your apartment, which no one will take away from you. Now imagine the next one. You wake up on the coast of North America, where you live with your tribe. Foreigners approach you. They do not very politely ask you to replenish your supplies, and when they are refused, one of them threatens to deprive you of the moonlight. The next night, the moon, as if someone had stolen it from the sky. When foreigners come again, you share food with them. You just don't know yet that you are dealing with Christopher Columbus. He is well versed in astronomy, so he managed to get around you. Indeed, on this day, there was a lunar eclipse. This man's visit set off a series of terrible events, when Columbus discovered America instead of Asia. All Spain rushed to this outlandish country for the Spaniards, Portugal rushed in pursuit, and then France, England and Holland. So the colonization of America began, without initially meeting resistance from the local population. The Europeans behaved like aggressors, killing and enslaving the indigenous inhabitants of America. The Spanish conquerors were especially cruel, who robbed, burned the villages of the settlers, and then killed them. Aching with pain, the fact is that after contacts with European settlers, Whole tribes that had been isolated from the world for years were fed diseases new to them. For example, father, they are sleeping. You die in a post-apocalyptic wastelands. You know that your tribe and culture were destroyed by conquerors. Worse than this can only be times of large-scale military conflicts, when there were great losses from all sides. You wake up, but this time in the middle of the night you and your like-minded people conspired to set fire to the Catholic Church. Today at midnight you are a student at Prague's Charles University, and instead of getting an education, you are forced to fight for your religion, freedom in military conflicts between the Holy Roman Empire of the German nation and the rest of Europe. It all started with a string of religious people. A clash between Protestants and Catholics in southern Germany. A war that eventually lasted a full 30 years was survived by only a third of the population. It took many areas more than a century to recover from the effects of economic and social decline. Total losses. According to various estimates, they ranged from 5 to 8 million people. But the worst thing is that you could not valiantly lie down in battle, but die of cut-off typhus, or from dysentery, or from the bubonic plague. There is evidence that in Germany, because of it, more people died than in battles. You could also wake up in the first half of the 20th century. During this period, in 30 years, 2 world wars have passed, and all over the world there have been genocides and massacres in the name of political ideologies, as a result of which hundreds of millions of people died, even if you were veterans who managed to survive the First World War. You could have died from the Spanish flu pandemic. She claimed up to 100 million people, which is 5% of the total population of the world. But the most destructive conflict of all times and peoples is the Second World War. This was the limit of human cruelty. In addition to hostilities, which, of course, took away many lives, the Nazis were ordered to exterminate all persons of Jewish nationality, as well as the Roma of some Slavs, Jehovah's Witnesses, representatives of the LGBT community, and people with mental and physical disabilities. In those years, 18 million people died, but the aggression was not only from the Nazis. On August 6, 1945. America dropped a nuclear bomb on civilians in Hiroshima in Japan. It had an explosive power equal to 15,000 tons in TNT equivalent. The bomb destroyed and burned about 70% of all buildings. The explosion killed about 140,000 people, and those who survived until the end of their days suffered from chronic diseases of cancer and other consequences of radiation. On this, going to bed during the Second World War. You could not be sure that waking up your house could blow up, burn, or shoot you in a dream. But what is the worst time in life in the entire history of the event that I will end with very much resembles the catastrophe with which I began. The worst morning in history looks like this. You wake up in Iceland 536 and do not see anything around because of the thick fog. At that time, the skies of Europe, the Middle East and parts of Asia were covered with so much dark fog that it blocked the sun for a year and a half. So the dark times began. The fact is that a catastrophic volcanic eruption took place in Iceland and overthrew the ashes into the northern hemisphere. But you do not know about this and consider the tragedy as some terrible sign of heaven, as if a higher power is punishing you for something. You are trying to dress as warmly as possible. After all, the average temperature of the Earth fell very sharply by 1.5–2.5 degrees Celsius. So, a whole 18 months. Thus began one of the coldest decades in the past 2,300 years. Drought and famine spread everywhere. Suddenly you feel bad, as if you are burning, you are weak, your head is spinning and bursting with pain, you are constantly losing consciousness, throws you all over the bed, you cough up blood and observe strange visions. So the plague will take your life. The plague mowed people down for 15 or 18 major waves of the pandemic. This disease killed about 50 million people. The streets were reinforced with corpses like a carpet. What can you say about the pandemic period? Are the years of our lives really the worst? People never lived longer, better, safer or richer than it is now. In the 18th century, the average life expectancy in the world was only 29 years. Today, on average, we can live to be 70. In just the last 25 years, a full seventh of humanity has been saved from extreme poverty thanks to economic growth. More people than ever before have enough food. Modern medicine has made significant progress in spreading democracy, made the world freer and safer. This staggering leap is the greatest achievement in human history. Write your comments, your reasons why you consider the time in which we are now living the best, and subscribe to the channel.